Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Creating the Workforce You Need, Strategies for Optimized Recruitment with an RPO Partnership. On behalf of Becker's Healthcare, thank you for joining us today. So before we get going here, I'm going to walk through a few pretty standard housekeeping instructions. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar today by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen, and we'll try to take a few of those as we move through the conversation today. This session is being recorded and will be available after the event. You can use the same link used to log into today's webinar to access the recording. If at any time you have trouble with your audio or video, first try refreshing your browser. You can also submit any technical questions into the Q&A box. We've got folks on the back end who can help out. So today I'm excited to be joined by a couple of amazing guests here. I'm thrilled to be joined by David Crawford, the Vice President of Talent Acquisition at NewYork-Presbyterian Hospital, and Kenric Thompson, the Vice President of Talent Delivery and Recruitment Solutions at AMN Healthcare. Really appreciate both you gentlemen being here today. Before we get going, I'm going to tap on each of you to just share a little bit more about your professional backgrounds, organizations, et cetera. David, you want to go first with that one?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for inviting me and having me participate. I do believe in full transparency. So where I'm speaking right now is a virtual office. This is not as luxurious as where I'm normally sitting. I oversee talent acquisition across the New York Presbyterian enterprise. There are about 40,000 employees that we have. As far as our location, NYP comprises our hospitals along with our medical groups. In addition to looking at our strategy, our technology, our processes, our platforms, I'm also the lead recruiter on a number of senior level positions that we happen to have at the organization. So I do get my hands dirty with some recruiting. We are one of the best places to work. Totally enjoy the work that we're doing, understand the importance of that, and I'm really looking forward to having a conversation to share what my experience has been within this recruitment market.
Great to have you here, David. And you're both giving me a bit of background envy here, but really appreciate you. Kenric, go ahead, introduce yourself.
All right, thanks, Brian. So excited to be here today as well, and be able to partner with David. For more than 2 decades, I've been actively involved in the healthcare industry, and I've devoted about 13 years to both hands-on patient care and healthcare leadership as a dedicated nurse and nurse leader. And throughout my journey, I've had the privilege of collaborating with numerous hospitals nationwide. And amidst these experiences, I've discovered that my true passion lies in patient well-being and the quality of care they receive. And my ultimate aspiration revolves around supporting organizations and leaders in attracting highly skilled and qualified nurses. And I aim to introduce best practices and innovative ideas that can facilitate positive transformations. And really, ultimately, my goal is to enable nurses to return to the bedside where they can offer the essential care that patients will require and deserve.
Excellent. Well, great to have you here as well, Kenric, and excited to get both of your sort of perspectives here as we move through this conversation. I want to begin with sort of a high-level overview of some trends you've seen in terms of the recruitment of healthcare staff over the past 18 months. Kenric, I want to get your perspective here first, seeing that you have a pretty large perspective, and then David, want to see how some of these trends are manifesting in your market as well. But Kenric, can you go ahead and give us that overview?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Okay, so I think many of us have heard a lot of the key words, those key buzzwords. I'm sure David has over the last 18 months. Candidate ghosting, quiet quitting, the Great Resignation, and then of course those traditional forces. That's the high demand, aging of the current workforce, shortage of qualified individuals, high turnover rates, and competition. And those are really creating some challenges in the healthcare recruiting. And have any of you actually experienced the healthcare system recently? Today on average, it takes about 26 days to schedule a new patient appointment with the physician. And I'm sure we've all kind of experienced this, and it can be quite frustrating. Surgeries are also being kind of postponed or rescheduled. Quality of care, I believe, is suffering. And there's a lot of inefficiencies and lack of available resources to offset this. And healthcare organizations are facing a variety of challenges, including, we've got inflation, supply chain, a shortage of available workers, And the increased cost of doing business is really driven by retaining and hiring employees. And when you start to dive a little bit deeper and you start asking questions about the state of healthcare union from a nursing perspective, you hear about the actual depth of problems facing nursing and healthcare. And AMN released recently the annual RN survey. And in this year's survey, I've got a couple of key facts for you here. And 30% of nurses say they're likely to leave their career due to the pandemic. Nurse satisfaction of quality of care provided declined 12 points. 81% of nurses experience a great deal or a lot of stress in their job. Feeling emotionally drained, that rose 15 points. Nurse career satisfaction has been at 80 to 85% for a decade, and in 2023 it dropped to 71%. And then, of course, the percentage of nurses likely to encourage others to become a nurse dropped 14 points as well. And perhaps I think the most shocking is that only 15% of hospital-employed nurses in the survey plan to continue working in their current position the next year. The other 85%, they're considering a new place of nursing employment, working as travel nurses, cutting back to part-time or per diem, taking a job outside of direct patient care. Some are returning to school, and others are sadly kind of leaving the profession altogether. And, while these are some frightening findings, I really can't stop thinking about how staffing challenges are impacting quality of care and patient satisfaction in today's healthcare. And David, you might be feeling this. An interesting fact here. Did you know that the average time to fill an RN vacancy, regardless of specialty, stands at 87 days? It's pretty significant. It's much higher. And, as a nurse myself, I try to focus on strategies to attract and retain nurses. And really, in my experience, I think there's still a great disconnect between what nurses want and what hospitals are actually offering. And, comp and wages are still a major concern. But what are employers doing about my safety as a nurse? And what are they doing to support my emotional well-being? What opportunities are they offering to advance my career or skill sets? How they help career coach and support my growth as a healthcare professional? And what flexibility are they offering me in scheduling and ensuring I have a work-life balance? And the other thing that I think is a challenge is, we've got a multi-generational difference that's also affecting our ability to recruit healthcare staff. So some want greater flexibility, some are motivated by what social causes the organization stands for, and each are kind of motivated by different things. And so each generation's relationship with organizations' authority, as well as their work styles, can vary tremendously and provide opportunities for organizations to attract and retain talent. And it's absolutely critical in today's talent acquisition landscape. And with 4 generations in the workforce, your organization needs to understand these differences, and building and recruiting retention strategies around them can actually make a big difference in attracting and retaining talent.
Thank you so much, Kenric. I think you just laid out really, really nicely sort of what's happening at a broad level with some of these trends. David, can you share sort of what's showing up in your Presbyterian? What challenges are you coming up against? Something that struck me is sort of like, even with some of my conversations with nursing leaders at organizations where they're seeing quote unquote boomerang nurses, or nurses come back to the profession, even those nurses that are coming back to the profession have different expectations in terms of what they want from their workplace, sort of as Kenric was laying out there. So David, turning it over to you now to get your assessment of how some of these trends have maybe manifested at your organization.
Sure. Well, one thing that we're definitely focusing on, and have always been, even pre-pandemic, is to provide comprehensive care to all. NewYork-Presbyterian, if you're not aware, we are affiliated with 2 academic medical centers, Weill Cornell Medicine and Columbia University Irving Medical Center. So with that, I'm in the New York market, and some of the things that we have seen most recently have been outside of how we control our operations, but things that we have to deal with. Number 1, wage transparency. So it is very different from when I used to recruit, 20 years or so ago, where I asked for all the information. Give me your pay stubs. Let me go behind the black box here and figure out, what the offer should be. Now what we do is we publish our job descriptions, and I have no idea what you're making, but you know what we want to pay. Then that is unique to Colorado and here in New York and a few other states, and I expect to see more wage transparency across the United States over the next few years. So that's one that impacts us. Number two comes down to supply and demand. I am not a clinician the way that Kenric is, but with that I see it as back to the old economics and running a particular business. What does this mean as far as being in a very competitive market? When you have not only the wage transparency, but here in New York, you could literally walk across the street at one of our hospitals to another healthcare system. So the competition has become more intense when you're looking at the number of nurses versus what the demand needs to be. And associated with that, at the height of the pandemic, we brought on along temporary workers, travelers. Well, the market has dramatically changed. And what we're looking to do is to shift into the hiring the employees, be it the full-time or the per diem. Now, to the point that was just raised, you're right. There are people who may be retired, but they are looking to come back on a per diem basis, or they're the boomerangs who worked here for a number of years, left, and they're interested in coming back maybe in a different type of role. So the dynamics have changed. What we've also seen is that this new definition of flexibility. And that's not just about number of days per week or hours or shifts. It's telehealth. It's telemedicine. It is automation. I'm not going down the path right now about artificial intelligence. It's good science fiction stuff, but there's a lot that's going on. But I would expect to see more of that in a very proactive, deliberate way that's going to benefit not only the patient, but then also the caregiver. The other piece I want to focus on is this realizing the importance of well-being, which is something that Kenric touched upon. And that is about the mind and the body. Now, before the pandemic, what we've had in a number of our nursing areas are these R4 committees. The 4 R's stand for recruitment, retention, recognition, and respect. You understand the recruitment and the retention piece, and there are strategies that a number of healthcare institutions have been focusing on. But I really want to point to recognition and respect and the difference between the two. With recognition, it kind of goes back to, during the height of the pandemic, the clappy hour, when people would acknowledge the goodwill, the resiliency, how people were thankful for the good work that people were doing. But respect has become even more important. Now we have a credo that focuses on respect. And let me highlight this. Respect is a genuine regard for one's feelings, for one's perspective, for one's point of view, which also includes their safety, their well-being, and trust. Now, what's so important with respect is the impact that has on how we interact with one another. And that's the piece that actually has become so important, not just within nursing, but with other jobs that we have here at NewYork-Presbyterian, and I would say across the nation, the focus on respect and what that means. So those are some of the key things that I've seen as far as trends or new things that have taken place within the recruitment market.
Thank you, David. And can you got to it a little bit there, sort of thinking about the mind and the body, the 4 R's, really an emphasis on respect. But what else are you doing to really sort of navigate these challenges? Can you give us some more details there about how you're sort of navigating some of these changes, how you put that respect element into practice? Any more information there you can share?
I guess a few things. Number one is more rounding, so that you have an opportunity to hear from people what is taking place. You can't just do it based on a virtual interaction, but I think that being present to solve problems and show that one cares. The other thing is through a pulse survey and checking to see how people evaluate and rate. And that way you're able to look at it by certain demographics. It's confidential, but just to see where people are. And that's generation, that's gender, that's a number of different factors that are there to see how people are engaged. Because it's one thing to be highly skilled and have the necessary credentials, but it's another to be highly engaged. A more engaged employee is one that really cares and is empathetic, which is what you need in healthcare anyway. So that piece of being more present so that decisions are made in conjunction with people who are performing the jobs. So you do show that you care, in addition to the pulse surveys. It also means listening to what's important to people. We don't want to be in a situation where we're rolling out programs and activities that don't resonate with folks. So I know that there are questions that come up about pay, for example, where you're somewhat limited if you have a collective bargaining agreement, a union that happens to be in place. But the thing is, when you're looking at compensation, you have to look across the organization, you have to look at the market, but at the same time, it's what will the market bear? Since when in any type of organization, payroll, employees, that is the #1 largest contributor as far as expense when you're looking at running an organization. So pay is very important. You need to be competitive, but at the same time, that means you have to be smart about it.
And then getting to that a little bit more in terms of thinking about, listening to what's important to people, engaging with your people and making sure they feel heard. It's one thing, I'm sure, to make sure folks are being heard, but it's another thing to have that heardness show up in application and actually in practice. But also, you can't do everything that people want to do, right? So curious how, David, if you can speak to how you try to strike that balance in terms of you are being heard. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're not doing. How big of a factor is transparent communication here?
Transparency is very important. Well, #1 is you hit on something there. You have to have communication. So it's not just about getting the information, but it's communicating. We have had leadership town halls, which include our CEO and executive vice president and chief operating officer going physically to places, conference room areas, auditoriums to speak to people. And what's been happening at these town halls, it's mostly been Q&A. It's not, here is a presentation where they're going to talk for 45 minutes and then see if there are any questions at the end. It's basically starting off on, here are some of the key business things that are taking place, but then automatically shifting to, and 80% of this time is devoted to what's on your mind. What questions do you have? And what you start seeing after the brave souls raise their hands, that more people become more comfortable in raising questions and asking them. And that's a great way to get to the top of the house so then actions can take place. It's also the way to frame. There are some points as you're just raising with, yes, we can do something about this, and other times, no, or other times it's a phased approach, and here's where we're going with that. So the communication piece is so important because it closes the loop.
Thank you, David. Kenric, I think this is a good time to check in with you too, in terms of seeing what you're seeing among some of your partners or folks out there in terms of the prioritizing communication, making sure folks feel heard.
Yeah, David, you bring up some really good points. I like your R's. You had 4 R's in there, and I heard an additional one, but the two we're kind of focusing on today, right, is the recruiting, maybe a little bit on retention, but I love the rounding. And I think it's important for leaders, nurse leaders, for hospital leaders, C-suite, to be out there, see what's really going on, experience that, listen, that active listening. Nurses want to be heard, right? Staff want to be heard. And I think offering that transparency is really key in helping to get the organization where they want to go, right? And so, what you're experiencing at NYP is really not uncommon. I've seen that and heard that throughout the nation. And in fact, in a lot of the clients that come to us, they're working through a lot of healthcare challenges, especially recruiting challenges. And they really need kind of that trusted partner that's really there to help achieve their strategic goals and objectives around the talent. And so, when we think about it in the market, you've got Total Talent Solutions, right? And that usually means offering a managed service program for agency staffing, and RPO for core talent. And really that only addresses how healthcare systems acquire talent. And at AMN, we really understand that a comprehensive total talent solution has to start with talent planning. And that's going to help inform your talent acquisition and talent deployment strategies. And along with that, you've got really three pillars, and namely talent acquisition, talent deployment, and talent planning. And those are enabled by a combination of analytics, services, and technologies. And we recognize that clients need a complete workforce solution, and that starts with talent planning, which is driven by data, specifically core and contingent utilization data to make proactive decisions.
Excellent. Like, Kenric,
I would certainly encourage you. Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry. I think you broke up there for me for a little bit, but then you queued back in. So go ahead and finish your thought.
All right. I was just going to say, David, I don't know if you and others have heard, I believe Becker's had a webcast, and our own AMN, Leora Westbrook and Angela Venditti, they did a podcast a couple weeks ago, and it was on reimagining nurse staffing. And I would definitely encourage you all to seek that out and listen to that. It's a great podcast. And, a couple of quick other things here. Many times we find that our clients are operating on outdated ATS platforms or technology, or they're using inefficient processes that can result in an unfavorable candidate experience. Or, maybe they could benefit from some best practices and increasing efficiency within the TA landscape. And, we're here to support your efforts in filling those roles. However, I think our partnership and value goes beyond that. And one of the things I think is key is, we're able to provide detailed data to help bring awareness of what's working well or where there could be improvement so that you can help implement that change and make those wise business decisions. And, we'll bring best practices, market analytics, and unmatched industry and recruiting experts to you. And we also learn about your organization's agency and core hours, and really are able to strategically focus our efforts on those low core and high agency use units through a variety of strategies. And, I'm kind of looking here, I'm seeing some questions coming through, and, one of them's talking about reimagining, staffing and others and retaining. How are you retaining staff? And, from the start of the pandemic to say 2027, think about this. I read this the other day that nearly 1 in 5 of the nation's 4.5 million nurses, they plan to leave the profession. And, we can partner with your talent acquisition teams and bring in qualified candidates. But if you have that many going out the door, the organization isn't going to be successful on its talent journey. And, clinical staff turnover, it represents a significant cost to the healthcare organizations. And, why are healthcare workers quitting? Well, some of the top reasons, not feeling valued, wages not keeping up with inflation, and lack of support for my well-being. Those are kind of the top 3. But from a nursing standpoint, there's a lot of factors at play here. Wages and flexibility in travel nursing, workplace violence, burnout, increased workloads, lack of support staff to support quality patient care, and chronic short staffing. And I think we've always kind of had these issues in nursing, and really COVID was the tipping point that kind of ripped the Band-Aid off, and it really finally exposed to all the many issues we nurses face and have faced. And think about this, and kind of closing this, is the quality of the work environment is directly related to burnout, job dissatisfaction, and retention.
Yeah, and to your point, Kenric, sort of about folks really wanting to feel supported, really wanting to feel seen and recognized. I think that trend is being reflected also in some of the questions that are coming in here. And so, David, I want to pose one to you, or they're both to you, and then Kenric, also feel free to comment. But really, both of you, what are some good ideas you have for recognition of the team? I think some of those would be helpful in terms of how people can put some of those recommendations to use, really actionable stuff there. And also, we've got somebody here, David, looking for you to repeat the 4 R's that you shared.
Yep, not a problem. As far as the 4 R's, this one's easy. It's recruitment, retention, recognition, and respect. To the piece about recognition, there are a lot of things that can be done. One is we have our Daisy Awards, Employee of the Month, we have acknowledgments of our preceptors, and we make a big deal about that on an annual basis for the people who are nominated and who are the recipients at all of our hospitals, and we do that. As a matter of fact, there are a number of people that we posted on our career site who are recipients of those awards. So that's one. The second thing is we have a recognition platform. I'll say what it is. It's OC Tanner. They're one of the leaders within this space, and you can send e-cards to people. As a matter of fact, you can copy their manager on that. And that is from great work, thank you, recognizing their work anniversaries, their birthdays, whatever that is, and actually publicizing, what the statistics look like about who receives it and doesn't. There's no money that's associated with it, but it's nice to know that someone's calling you out for something that you did right and that someone appreciates. The other thing that we do is we celebrate the recognition months within healthcare, be it when nursing week or nursing month, and just saying appreciation for what people have done. So I think there are nice ways, either big or small, to just show appreciation. That's really important. The other thing, one of the questions that came through had to do with travelers, and I think that'll help shift the conversation over to recruitment. We did take on a number of travelers, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, and we continued to have travelers, but not at the height of what we had before. There will always be a need to have travelers here, because you need a traveler when you have an employee who's on a leave of absence. Well, you can't backfill the person because that headcount's still there, so a leave of absence. Or it might be that you have a lot of new grads who are going through an orientation, so they're not productive yet. They cannot take the same caseload as other experienced nurses, or because of a surge or a new business that's been lined up. So you need to have the temporary workers here. But you are right, the person who submitted that question. It's expensive, and typically for the travelers on 13-week assignments. So what are we doing as a result of that? Reducing the number of travelers and hiring more employees in order to hit our open headcount. So that is taking place. What we've discovered, though, is that we needed assistance in order to do that, and that is where we partnered with AMN as an RPO, a recruitment process outsourcing. So the recruiters that we have through AMN are having full life cycle involvement, just the same as my employee recruiters, from the time that a position's open to the time that an offer is extended and the new person joins us. So there's definitely been a focus on bringing in, partnering with the RPO, because that's elastic. I don't need to hire all of those recruiters, but they are working on our behalf to fill the vacancies that we have to get time to fill below where it is right now or where we want it to be.
Yeah, can you share a little bit more about what that experience has been like for you, David, in terms of your partnership and leveraging RPO here? Any more details you can share with folks? And then, of course, Kenric, I want to get your thoughts in terms of what makes for a great partnership here. How do you really ensure success?
I'll speak to it from my side. Now, I've been in HR for a number of years, actually before this century began, which gives you some insight. And I have to, even though I'm here with Kenric and talking about AMN and the partnership that we have, which has gone very well, I was never a fan of an RPO. I did not believe that was the right thing to do, to bring people on board, that only an employee who had the best interest of the organization was the right person to speak to. Well, obviously, I changed my mind. And why did I do that? Because the recruiters that we had on our team were managing 100 requisitions. There were some people managing 150. How is that effective? Because that is going to play into, do we have enough staff to deliver the patient care that our patients deserve and to focus on the quality of service that's provided? So what did we have to do about that? Well, we partnered with AMN that we work with on the traveler side. And with that, when we started very small as a pilot, was that when we were bringing people on board through the RPO to be recruiters, it would be full life cycle. They would have client groups and they would be engaged from the beginning of that requisition being created. They would source candidates, interview candidates, work with the hiring team, put together the offer, extend the offer, see the person through onboarding. They would also have access to our systems, access to our HR business partners, seek guidance if they needed it from legal or from IT. So it was full service and fully integrated, the same as our NYP recruiters. As a matter of fact, not only did they have access to our systems, they had an nyp.org email address, because it should not make a difference to a candidate if they're RPO or not. And we don't need people advertising that it's through an RPO. So I think the success there has been full integration, not just an extension up to a point and then you hand it over. That's one learning that we definitely have embraced, and it has worked out very well.
Thank you for sharing that. That full integration piece sounds like just very crucial in terms of giving candidates that experience that very much feels like New York-Presbyterian, right? Kenric, can you talk about things from your side of the partnership? What's made it such a success?
You know, I think about all the recruitment strategies that David and team has used and how we have partnered. And I think one of the things that's also critical and important is that direct access to the hiring managers, right? And I think as an RPO partner, the relationships created and nurtured with hiring managers are critical. And we really focus on developing these hiring manager relationships in the very beginning. And, you know, we want to become those trusted advisors and consultants to the team. And we do that first by recognizing that we're an integral part of the client's business. And we have a stake in it. And rather than merely fulfilling orders, our responsibility lies in consulting and offering guidance on optimal strategies for attracting the right talent. And that starts with the very first call that we make to the hiring manager. And think of our recruiting teams and partnership as a strategic, data-driven, and influential business partner who can deliver value just beyond filling roles. And, you know, another thing, candidate marketing. You know, we develop candidate marketing campaigns that help our organizations stand out in the job market. And I think for many of those, you know, there's a big budget and focus on patient attraction and brand recognition, but often less attention and money is spent on defining their employee value proposition, which I think could be detrimental to attracting candidates and making you really stand out from the organization that's literally across the street, right, David? So it's critical to share with job seekers why your organization is the best choice for their career and why your org is the preferred employer of choice in the area. And, you know, we know that every organization is unique, but what makes your culture and work environment better than others? How will your org help an employee grow and flourish? What are the advantages of working for said organization? You know, we like to capitalize and activate or amplify our client's EVP, ensuring that we're capturing our job seekers' attention, you know, at every digital touch point, right? It's all digital now. Every digital touch point they make in making a decision to land a new opportunity. And, you know, we design our strategies around every stage with multiple channels, tactics to complement the stage they're in to ensure we're sharing the messaging that resonates really where they are in that journey. And, you know, with all of this said, I feel to be a truly effective and successful partner and really understand our clients and their challenges, it's important to really know them, right? And so, you know, we can assess and analyze recruitment processes, provide recommended best practices to enhance and ensure there's efficient and memorable candidate experience. You know, we meet and talk with staff and clinicians. We walk the halls to find out what we're recruiting for. You know, we want to gain an understanding of the culture and the atmosphere and gain that insight into each department we're partnering with so we can effectively bring in the right talent and ensure a lasting client-candidate relationship. And, you know, it's not just a rec for us to fill. And I think because of all of this, AMN RPO clients, you know, we've achieved a year-to-date fill rate of 87% in 54 days.
Impressive numbers and such an important point around sort of making sure that you understand the culture of the folks you're partnering with. You understand what makes it a great place to work, who's going to be the right fit. We've had a ton of questions pour in here, so I want to make sure we get to some of these audience questions here. So the first one, just looking for any commentary on experience with international nurses. Any thoughts there?
Yes. So with that, again, I'm not trying to do this as an AMN commercial, but the truth of the matter is we have relied on a division of AMN to assist with finding, international nurses for us. Those are nurses that are working outside of the United States, actually outside of North America. That's O'Grady Payton, an organization that's been around for a number of years. So yes, they are actively working with us in order to bring on board international nurses. Now, the situation is, and this has nothing to do with New York-Presbyterian or actually healthcare, the federal government has a watchful eye on the number of visas that are being distributed. And that also includes green cards. I think what we need to do as an industry is to be more vocal about raising the awareness and that the number of visas that we do need to bring nurses in from outside of the United States. I think that would definitely be a huge benefit. So I'm a supporter of bringing more nurses in from outside of the United States, and that is something that we are working on. It's not a large portion, but at least it's something. So yes, we are focusing on international nurses. And I see there's another question there about bill rates rising. No, they're not. They're coming down. The traveler market, in a way, is drying up from where it was before. It's not sustainable. You cannot bring people on board with a bill rate that's typically 2 or 3 times what a normal cost is. So that cost is definitely coming down, and it should. The market bears what it should be. So we've definitely seen a decrease even in the New York metro area.
Thank you, David. And there's another question I want to get to, but Kenric, want to make any space for you here to sort of comment on the international nurses piece?
I definitely agree with what David said, and that's one of the great things about your partners. We provided a variety of services, including international nurses. But I want to kind of go back a little bit here and talk about, David mentioned cost, right? And so we've got a lot of things that are affecting recruiting. Our hospitals' operating margins are slim to none these days, and really it's kind of a result of that contingent labor. And so, staff want more flexibility. David mentioned that earlier. We talked about flexibility and multi-generational differences, and each of them have differing work values and priorities, right? So, hospitals need to think of alternatives and think outside the box when it comes to flexibility. And how can we still provide the same, or if not better, quality of care, keep our costs contained or even decrease them? Can we improve the processes and enhance productivity and efficiency in our patient care staff? And what are some alternative approaches to getting our nurses back to the bedside and taking care of patients? Are there alternative care models or untraditional schedules and shifts that we can offer to help attract and then retain those new and current nurses? What kind of upskilling and career coaching can organizations offer nurses and others? And, what are some effective ways in which organizations can provide that safe, high quality care that meets the needs of patients and acuities, is flexible, and utilize the skill sets of nurses? And, in the past, healthcare systems have attempted to build float pools to have a cost-effective alternative to agency and a work option for those that have some great skill sets or want flexibility in the care areas they serve, or really want to, expand their portfolio of skilled areas of care. And this degree of diversification and breadth of services requires a highly coordinated network of care providers to effectively manage and meet patient and volume demand. And we're actually hearing from many in the industry and actually partnering with them on building internal agencies and internal travel or float teams as well. And having the right mix of core and contingent resources results in cost-effective management of the workforce volume, as well as ensuring quality with staff levels at the right numbers and individuals working at the top of their scope. And in this day and age in healthcare, we really need to think of innovation, efficiency, and to define and execute a total talent solution and strategy. And to meet the changing needs of kind of how and where healthcare is delivered and the work and work-life balance demands of the workforce, it's a must-have for our partners to attract and retain staff. And it really goes beyond thinking of that full-time, part-time, and per diem. And a lot of the providers are looking to realize those cost savings or develop greater footprints through expansions of services and number of touch points. And they also must increase their sophistication of their workforce management strategies. And so as your RPO partner and us being AMN Healthcare, we offer a variety of services and are that total talent partner and solution that you're seeking.
Some really important points there, Kenric, around sort of flexibility and integrating some of these flexible models here. We've got more questions we can take from the audience, but David, wanted to give you some space to sort of react to what Kenric shared there and speak to anything about the flexible models component here that you think is important for folks to understand.
It's going to continue to change as far as what flexibility is and redefining that. And I think as long as organizations are open to having discussions about that makes sense. This idea of an internal flow pool is actually a great one, and that should be embraced by organizations. But they have to figure out, given their construct, what works for them and what doesn't. I definitely, in the interest of time, want to focus on a number of questions that have come through, because I want people to get the information that they're seeking if they value what our response is. I see that there was something in there about travelers and any type of regulation based on local versus outside. We don't face that here. What we are doing, though, is that we have two traveler rates. One's like a local traveler rate, and the other one is a genuine, they're coming from another state. And what we've been trying to do is focus on more of the local folks. One way around that I'm thinking is, especially if you're looking at other resources, people who are nurses at another healthcare system, maybe you can bring them on board as per diem, especially if people are working 3 12-hour shifts, and that's kind of customary. Then maybe for a 4th shift or something like that at another healthcare institution, they might be then available to work and supplement, where some of the gaps are. So that's one thing that I would offer as an alternative. I know a question's in here, and it's a loaded question, so I'll put it out here because it's real. Are there any downsides to using an RPO? Well, I spoke about what the benefits are. It's an extension of my staff, right? Which means that we can focus on time to fill, not having a lot of aged items out there, and enhancing the candidate experience when they apply and they actually get heard. We see them, and that we can move them forward in the process. The thing is, it's more expensive to have an RPO model than having your own recruiters. But it is cheaper, less expensive than having a contingency search firm find people for you. So you have to figure out what the right model is and where that would work. But as far as getting folks engaged in working with them, by having that full life cycle approach, not just sourcing or screening for you, but filling jobs, that's something that you need to think about. But also, the good point is, it's elastic, meaning that I can dial down the number of recruiters that are supporting NewYork-Presbyterian without having to deal with layoffs or furloughs. It's just I don't need them because they're not NewYork-Presbyterian employees. So hopefully that answers that question. And as
David,
far as,
you're absolutely right. Scalability, I think it's one of the biggest values that AMN Healthcare RPO can kind of bring to the table. Just like you said, we're able to flex up or down, our teams based on your client's staffing needs and priorities. And I think that's key. And, we talk about contingent labor, and I see some things in the questions about contingent labor and I think I saw something not too long ago from Incredible Health on what many CEOs and CNOs are facing right now. And that's kind of that most, if not all, of healthcare systems are using travel or contingent nurses to keep up with that demand. And it makes up about 25% or a quarter of their overall nursing staff. So we know it's killed budgets. We know it's reduced operating margins. And we're seeing a lot of healthcare organizations placing priority and focus on securing permanent staff and reducing that contingent labor spend. And think of it this way, if I can replace 20 travelers with permanent full-time nurses, an organization can save several $1 million a year. And they can do that really through a partnership with an RPO. And we can really focus on helping to reduce those costs in a couple of key areas. And one is candidate pre-screening, assessment, and engagement. And looking into end-to-end requisition process efficiency and optimization, and time to fill reductions, and minimizing the lost productivity of long vacancies, and identification of strategies to reduce actual cost per hire, and enterprise level analysis of staffing needs and pain points, and help to reduce the premium dependency on that labor and overtime. And, a lot of times clients focus on what it will cost to fill a position versus taking into consideration what it will cost them if they don't fill the position. And I think that's key.
Really appreciate you. Go ahead, David.
Now, I was going to say, I totally agree with that. The other piece comes down to turnover. So if a person doesn't stay in that particular role for a year, that is unfortunate, because that either means that hire made a mistake or we did. And what we want to do is avoid those particular situations, which then gets back to, do people understand what they're walking into, what the demands are of the job? Do they understand what the vision is, the culture of the organization? Those things are critically important so that we don't have those unfortunate situations. I understand life happens. There are things that maybe for personal reasons, a person, has to relocate or something that's going on. But if it's just not fitting in or not feeling comfortable, then that, I would say, is very unfortunate.
Yeah, there are things
questions that were there.
Yeah, I think it's just a strong point around sort of, there are things that can't be controlled, but you want to control all that you can in this environment and make sure you're setting people up for success. I think the question I wanted to be sure we grabbed, the audience question here, is about the trend of sort of nurses choosing not to work at the bedside. So the audience member cites a recent article from National Nurses United that stated, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are currently more than 1 million nurses in the U.S. with active licenses choosing not to work at the bedside. The attendee then wants to hear some thoughts from each of you as to the why behind this trend.
Dave, do you want me to take this one?
Well, I can respond, and then you can see what you can speak about nationally.
Okay, yeah.
But part of it comes down to what Kenric was talking about before: burnout, or having a desire to try something different. I think one thing that's key, if I'm shifting away from the burnout conversation, is that nurses have choices. That there are more industries, there are more types of jobs that are looking for nurses that aren't necessarily bedside positions. That's a good thing, to get people who have a clinical view, who understand what patient care delivery should be in an optimal way. I think that is okay. But that point being, because there was another question I wanted to link it to this, is that we do need to focus on that new wave of nurses coming in, which is why we have strong partnerships with many nursing schools. That means being present there. That means bringing them on site for training. That also means offering them jobs, maybe before they graduate, before they pass the NCLEX, to start working as nursing aides. So that way they get a full experience of what it's like to be in a hospital, compared to the way things were during the pandemic, when nursing students weren't coming on site at hospitals. Everything was done in an academic type setting, so they didn't really have a full understanding. So I think it is really important for healthcare institutions, for this industry, to support nursing education. And that's not just for the new grads, that's continuing education as well for advanced degrees and specializations.
You're right, David. And we had COVID come through, and the nurses in nursing school were not getting the hands-on training and the interaction with patients. And now they're starting to come out of school and they're actually performing at the bedside and getting into it. And they're like, what did I get myself into here? This was not what I expected or what I was taught in nursing school. And so we have a generation of nurses coming out of school that I think are ill-equipped to kind of care for the demands of providing safe and high quality patient care. And so that's something that we really need to kind of focus on. And, I see a question in here that kind of capitalizes on this is, why do nurses have to work 12-hour shifts and alternating weekends? I ask that question all the time. And that's one of the things I think that we need to think about and think outside the box is, in nursing, we've always done it this way, where we've done this for 20 years. And I always would challenge that. Why? Why are we still doing it this way? Let's think about different ways that we can offer differing shifts, alternative shifts. If we can offer more flexibility to try and help meet the demands, to bring in some of those nurses. Maybe you've got nurses that are, parents and the other spouse or whatever's working, or they're single, and they really need that flexibility. They've got a great skill set. How can we get some of those nurses back into, healthcare and at the bedside taking care of patients? So, and as David said, there's so many more choices now as nurses, a lot of choices. So it's definitely what we're competing with.
And the change here, I imagine, requires breaking away from the status quo. I can't imagine that what's worked in the past is going to work now, considering like the breadth and scope of some of these challenges that's in the workforce.
Yes. There are a couple more questions that came through. I didn't know if you wanted to go to those. Tim, in particular, you have a number of questions there. I wanted to just nail them to make sure that we did address your questions. As far as, let's see, there was something about the average attrition of nurses today versus pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, we're pretty good at NewYork-Presbyterian, it's pretty low. Did it spike up? Yes. But what we've seen most recently, and I'm talking about for this year, the attrition rate is improving. So there isn't as much movement as there was. But I think especially during the past 3 years, it did increase. But as things are settling down, and yes, we're doing more, than we've done before, be it, operations or electives or things like that. Yes, we're starting to see the market calm down, not as much attrition as we saw before. You had another question in there about self-employed clinicians. I'm not sure I understand your question, but we are looking for people maybe who have been on their own, but the idea is you're not going to do that same thing here. You have to be hired as an employee. Do we hire people who have been in those situations? It depends on the situation. So I'll say yes, but also no, but also it depends on what the environment is like or what the type of healthcare institution is. Community hospital versus, a place like this. But I would say that it depends on the opportunity. There's nothing that's saying, oh, you're not eligible. I wouldn't say anything like that at all. And I think you had one more question in here.
David, I wonder if that question...
About the shifts, though, it depends on the situation. Not at all places is it going to be 12 hours. I think it depends on what the situation is. In some cases, it might be 8. So it depends on the HR structure and how that unit is working.
And, David, to kind of, on that question of self-employed clinicians, like, nurses, nurse practitioners, have you heard or had any experience with hospitals looking to build their own internal agencies, so to speak, and going that route? And I know that we've had a lot of discussions and interest in that. Do you think there's a lot of value with that? And it goes back to that question of the self-employed clinicians, right?
It does. If there's a way to have, build your own agency, I mean, obviously there's a cost and there are resources that are there. But, especially when there are people who are good in the organization and they want to float or take on additional shift or something like that, we want to make sure that that's handled appropriately. So I think it's a smart way to do it. When I'm looking at internal mobility, the people who are posting for other opportunities here at NewYork-Presbyterian, what I see is that's the number one area where people are looking to advance their career, move laterally, pick up a different skill set. So internal mobility, in addition to what you were just talking about, I think should be a top priority of organizations, because if someone's looking for another opportunity and they can't find it at the institution where they are, they will find it someplace else. So that's why I'm a big supporter of internal mobility and connecting with your employees about looking at a proper career development plan or a career ladder.
Dave, that's actually key. And when you look at first year turnover, I think average is over or around 30% for first year turnover in nursing. And it's crazy. And I think a lot of traditionally, nurses, you got to go into med surg, you got to go in on nights. And a lot of them are kind of bucking that old way of thinking and really want to get into more of the specialty. But at the same time, they're asking, what is my employer going to do to help support my growth as a nurse? I don't want to be stuck here in med surg or telemetry. I want to be able to expand my skills, or how can I learn a new skill so that I can help out another department that's in need, and upskill and gain some new things. So it's a challenge, but also there's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel if organizations start to think outside that box. Yep. And untraditionally.
So there was a question here about attrition. We've been very fortunate at New York-Presbyterian, which probably speaks to the type of work that the people are doing and how they feel engaged. Our attrition at the height was in the teens. Normally it's single digit. So I just think that speaks to the quality of work that people are doing, being engaged here, the fact that they like working here. We have people who have been here for like 30 or 40 years. So I think that's something that speaks to New York-Presbyterian and where we are. And I feel, especially, given the work that I do in recruiting, we're very fortunate to have that type of experience with not a lot of turnover.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in here because we are running tight on time. I know we didn't get to all the audience questions, but we'll have folks follow up afterward. I'm sure we'll have those opportunities as well. Great engagement from the audience. It's always great to see. Wonderful job today, David and Kenric. I want to pause here. Is this something we do before we wrap up every webinar conversation we have? Just any final closing thoughts, anything you want to leave with folks before we sign off today? David, I'll give you first crack at it. Then Kenric, we can hear from you.
I guess the first thing that I would say is, the important work that our nurses are doing and others, it's really critical. I've worked primarily in financial services, outside of healthcare, where everything seemed to be life and death. The truth of the matter, it's not. This place is. And what I see, especially here at New York-Presbyterian, it's about finding individuals who are going to work together as a team to take care of a patient who is vulnerable, who's scared, who needs expert medical attention. And that's making a difference not only to the patients that we serve, but also to their families, their friends, and making a difference. No one wants to we're not Disney. No one wants to go to a hospital. They're coming here because they need us. And that is why this is so important to have this conversation about the workforce that we have.
Thank you, David. Very, very much appreciate your contributions today. It was great to have an opportunity to speak with you. Kenric, go ahead with your closing thoughts.
David, I love how you tie it all back to patient care, right? Because that's really what this is all about. And especially this conversation is talent attraction and getting nurses and support staff back to the bedside so they can really support and provide great patient care. And, I definitely like to everyone to know the value that a true healthcare RPO partner can bring. And when you think about it, you think about scalability, flexibility, and speed to market. And, your needs are going to ebb and flow, and that requires an RPO program to flex up and down. And an integrated RPO solution really provides that scalability and flexibility and recruitment consistency while reducing, fixed and variable labor costs. And, as your partner, we realize that different health systems have different needs. And so we see a shift really towards individuals seeking meaningful work that aligns with an organization's mission and values. And in order to maintain and remain relevant and succeed, organizations need to innovate and adapt their TA strategy based on the shifting talent landscape. And, one of the things, my final thought here, as David mentioned earlier, is, AM in healthcare, we're your single partner solution to a flexible workforce. And, we take pride in having established the nation's most expansive and diverse network of skilled and well-supported healthcare professionals to meet all of our clients' needs. And, our services encompass a wide variety and array of specialty recruitment and assignment options, catering to both permanent placements and temporary positions for nursing and allied professionals, physicians, advanced practice providers, and additionally, we provide, that valuable assistance to organizations and really enhancing their operations and efficiencies by offering, top tier executives, leaders, and ranging from experience from managers to C-suite executives and revenue cycle professionals. And along with staffing and consultation, we provide solutions for better placement, processes, and outcomes through vendor management systems, scheduling and staff planning, and virtual care management. And it's a pleasure to be here today to speak with David and be able to partner with him. And grateful for all of the questions that have come in. And I think I saw one on this here that said, some Olga's recommending that we have a follow-up webinar. So David, maybe you and I do this again, or maybe we do it with a CNO as well. So maybe I'll see you here soon.
That'd be
pretty
terrific.
popular. Yeah, I think you guys got something going here. It was a pleasure to be a part of it. Kenric, thank you so much. David, thank you as well. I want to thank AMN Healthcare also for helping us put this together, for sponsoring today's webinar. On behalf of Becker's, thanks to everyone who engaged with this. Great questions as well from the audience. To learn more about what we discussed today, you can check out the resources section on your webinar console and do fill out that post-webinar survey. We appreciate the feedback. Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.